Everybody in the world thinks cancer is a genetic disease because cancer cells have mutations. What we have said, and the way we all those mutations are there. We don't deny the mutations. We just said they come from damage to the energy ability of the cell. The cell has to ferment. Its oxidative phosphorylation is defective, and the defective OXPHOS produces reactive oxygen species, ROS, that are carcinogenic and mutagenic. So the mutations that people focusing on, these giant genomic screens and these multi-billion-dollar genomic atlas productions, this is all downstream epiphenomena of the damage to respiration. Metabolic therapy, which we developed, ketogenic metabolic therapy, will kill cancer cells and manage cancer cells without toxicity. And that's the thing that makes it uniquely different. And then we blend some of the standards of care in with metabolic therapy to reduce levels of toxicity. And our goal is to keep people alive without toxicity and a higher quality of life for as long as we possibly can. Now, does it represent a cure or not? We have no clue.
Cancer is essentially a disease of modernity and essentially of progress is what, when I listening to your work, when I read your work and listening to you. But what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, cancer is a disease of food technology. It's not only that, it's our whole Western way of living. Our technologies have evolved so much faster than our biology. And, ancient Paleolithic man did not have to sit in traffic getting all freaked out. He had a lot of exercise. He didn't have the convenience of sitting in front of a television. He didn't have the convenience of delicatessens and donut shops on every corner. Highly processed carbohydrates were not part of his diet. The issues that we are confronted with today are minimal exercise relative to the Paleolithic man, the presence of massive amounts of highly processed carbohydrates, processed foods with minimal natural nutrition. We are confronted with poor sleep. We are confronted with emotional stress.
Yes. Yeah.
We have all of these, and we have toxins in the environment. You put all that together, and you have not only an epidemic of cancer, you have an epidemic of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and dementia. We see numbers now where obesity is replacing smoking as a risk factor for cancer. Obesity is often linked to type 2 diabetes as well. And when you have type 2 diabetes, you have insulin insensitivity and you have systemic inflammation. All of these will contribute to damage to oxidative phosphorylation, leading to not only cancer, but you can also get dementia and cardiovascular disease. All of these are linked together to metabolic in homeostasis. We all should be in metabolic homeostasis, where all cells, all organ systems and cell systems are synced together. The whole body is a machine. The brain, the liver, the lungs, the kidneys, the muscles, the different organ systems are all linked together in a whole. Metabolic homeostasis means that we are at optimal energetic efficiency in all organ systems at the same time. And our diets and lifestyles, due to the advance in technologies, are putting us at risk. We're not we don't have as much exercise. We have a lot of more emotional stress. We have all kinds of we have poor sleep at night. Sometimes we're depressed because with the stress of living in a modern society. The cancer epidemic really didn't start probably until the mid-1900s, when we started to see more and more of our technology, and exploded big time when we started to use high fructose corn syrup as a replacement for glucose, and the lack of exercise and the stress and all this stuff pounding our societies, causing them to be at risk for all of these chronic diseases, cancer being one of them. So how do we bring ourselves back to metabolic homeostasis? Well, it's hard. It's hard in an environment where we're constantly tempted by delicious foods and convenience of movement. We have beautiful vehicles. We have all kinds of mass transportation. We don't have to walk as far. We don't have to ride horses. We don't have to do any of this stuff. So we're putting ourselves at risk. But I think once people know then they can make choices. When the patient is in a state of metabolic homeostasis, if I put it that way, nutritional ketosis, the cancer cells are all already under significant metabolic stress, and doesn't take much more to push them over the brink of viability. So you can come in with radiation, chemo, and all the things we're currently using. It's just that you would use them in a different strategic way. You wouldn't have to use them at maximum doses. You wouldn't have to use them all the time. We can pare down those tumors, shrink them down, make them indolent, and then come in and get rid of them either with a minor surgical procedure or a radiation dose or even an immunotherapy. So we just have to know when and how to use the tools that we have. That's why we just published this big paper just last week in BMC Medicine on how to manage glioblastoma, a brain cancer. But also, the same strategy can be used to manage all cancer. All major cancers have the same problem. They're dependent on a fermentation metabolism. They can't grow using oxidative phosphorylation. They're dependent on what we call substrate level phosphorylation. This is producing energy without oxygen. So this is we all know, lung, liver, bladder. I went through all the major cancers and showed they all have the same problem. It's just that it happens in a lung, different from a brain. The cell, obviously, from the brain is different from the cell of a liver. But when you look at the cancer, they're both using fermentation metabolism to grow. So the same strategy can be used to manage all these major cancers. And we know the metastatic cancer cells are dependent on glucose and glutamine.
How does stress damage mitochondria, or does stress damage mitochondria?
Well, you can damage. I wrote a big thing of this in my book and also in these papers. I mean, you can damage mitochondria by chronic inflammation. Okay, chronic inflammation will damage oxidative phosphorylation and a lot of disease associated with chronic inflammation. Intermittent hypoxia. This is what Warburg said a long time ago. You're breathing. You're not. There's blood vessels come in. They could be occluded slightly, causing intermittent hypoxia. Come back, forming reactive oxygen species, which damage mitochondria, cause the mutations in the nucleus. You get a lot of that. Oncogenic viruses. Okay, wow, we have hepatitis viruses. We got papilloma viruses. We got these other. People thought cancer was caused by viruses, and what I found and others that these viruses damage oxidative phosphorylation. They go for the mitochondria. They damage the mitochondria, leading to a transition to fermentation. What else? Age. The older you get, we have rare inherited mutations, inherited germline mutations. Every one of them damages in some way the mitochondria, whether it's the BRCA1 for breast cancer, whether it's the Li-Fraumeni for brain cancer, whether it's the retinoblastoma one. They all have a linkage to damaged mitochondria. So the origin of cancer is insufficient oxidative phosphorylation coupled to a compensatory fermentation. And it takes a while for a cell to do that. And the cancer cells are all throwing out the waste products of fermentation, which is lactic acid and succinic acid. So the cancer cells are telling us exactly what is wrong with them and exactly why they're dysregulated in their growth. We have chosen to ignore that by focusing on the mutations that are downstream epiphenomena.